welcome. What to expect today, I'm going to be sharing, and then my better three-quarters, who happens to be her birthday today, is going to be coming upstairs and sharing some music with the team here. I'll disappear down the stairs and share the same things with our younger crowd and members of our community. I'm going to pray, and then we're just going to kick off. And if you have a Bible and are super eager, you can turn in the book of Acts. Lord, thank you for letting us gather today. Lord, fill us with your energy, with your joy, and I just pray in Jesus' name that the words I'm going to share and the music that we share later, it's just your music and your words. It's not my own. It's not Vineyard. It's just what your kingdom's doing. I pray for and thank you for all those who are serving across this building today, and bless the Methodist Church who has allowed us to gather. Amen. Last week, something phenomenal happened. Most of the people who were here that week aren't here right now, which means it was so phenomenal that it drove them out of the church, probably. But we looked at something called joy. Does anyone know what joy is? Yes. Something more than... and it was actually quite astonishing. The people I told afterwards didn't believe it. I talked to another friend and said, "What happened at church?" I said, "Do you ever believe a conga line?" You could just hear "You're really weird." So why would you have a conga line? Because people being joyful in church, it just doesn't work. Church and joy generally don't go. Church and happiness, you kind of go to have your religious fix, but never joy fix. And interestingly enough, it's all over the Bible. I mean, there's a bunch of boring churches scattered throughout God's book, and we looked at one, and we're going to look at that passage again as we move on to see what did Satan do after Easter. Remember the Easter bunny, Easter eggs, lots of food. And that Jesus character who came out of the tomb. You might remember that person from the story. The next 4 weeks, what happened? And we've seen that Satan was not a fan of what happened on the cross, and so now down from 12 disciples to 11, he did everything possible to kill off the church before it could take a foothold in Jerusalem, which was at the crossroads of a number of important trade routes. And so, first of all, we looked first week at Genesis chapter 3, doubt. If Satan could convince Jesus' followers that Jesus wasn't whom he said he was, that was it. No God, no kingdom of God, nothing to worry about. And you remember, one of Jesus' disciples, one of his followers, got a great name that stuck with him for 2,000 years because he was so filled with doubt. His name was Thomas. And does anyone know, who's anyone in church long enough to know what his official church Sunday school name is? Someone out there knows this answer. It's not Jesus, and it's not pizza. Those are the two answers most commonly given at CVM. So a cake being number 3. Number 4, does anyone know what this guy's churchy name is? His first name was Thomas. Doubting Thomas. Yes! He was so filled with doubt. Yes! Back row. Ooh, is it clean? Oh, yes! Honest Thomas. I love Thomas because he was up front, as you said. I can't say your name because we're recording, but you amazing person whose name starts with an A, amazing A. We'll leave it there. He was honest. He said, "I just don't believe any of this Jesus stuff anymore." And the other followers said, "Thomas, you got to come and say it." And we saw that church is not a place that does not have doubt. Church should be a place that is got full of doubters, just like Thomas. But church should also be a place where we're not held captive, prisoner by our doubts. Because that's what Satan wants to do. All he wants to do is plant the doubt enough that it just stops us from doing anything. And we just go, Ugh. And as soon as he got a bunch of church people going, Ugh, he doesn't have to worry. And so the problem was the doubt trick didn't work. It worked great in Genesis chapter 3 with Adam and Eve. Did God really say? Adam, Eve, bit. Done. The fall, out of the garden. Jesus comes back, reopens the garden. So what does Satan do? He goes back to the same trick that closed the first garden. And he says, "Was Jesus really Jesus? Oh, man, I don't know. Forget it. I'm going back to fishing. Where's Sky Plus? I've missed way too many Rust Valley Restoration episodes. And if you have not, by the way, have a Netflix account, which is controversial. Rust Valley Restoration, amazing show. We're going to find out what happened next, though. And last week we saw doubt didn't work. And so then Peter took the lame man by the right hand. Peter went to a prayer meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. How super holy is that? Someone went to church in the afternoon during the week when his mother wasn't expecting him or calling him. And he went, and Peter did this amazing thing. He actually did something spiritual on the way to church as opposed to flipping off the person who cut them off on the M60 or having a row with whomever you're in the car with. Ever notice how many rows you have going to church with your kids? Well, they are perfect angels, except 2 nights a week. The one night is when you're trying to get your house ready for a small group, and my daughters start fighting. It's always at about 5:55 p.m. Rah! Oh, yeah, it's Wednesday night. And the other night, or the other day they start going into a scrap, is Saturdays, generally about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, these people went, and they were so full of the Spirit, they didn't even wait to get to church to do something for God. And they saw this man, and they helped him by the right hand and helped him up. And he was a person who'd sat outside church, was never allowed to go in. And the man's feet and ankles were instantly healed and strengthened. He jumped up, stood on his feet, and began to walk. And then, you imagine if you saw this in church? I want you all just to read this next line. Just imagine if this actually happened in church. Not the healing part. That's not the amazing part. The amazing part is this part. Walking, leaping, and praising. I need all you guys to read that line right there. Shout it out. Oh man, are we just full of today? I knew it. We were going to have 1 week of joy, and 7 days later we're back to when's this going to end? I mean, the FA Cup's on. Let's hurry this thing up. Walking, leaping, praising. Come on, everyone. Walking, leaping, praising. Now, I want you all to stand up. Come on, stand up. Don't worry, we're not going to move slides okay. Now I want you to walk in place. And now what? Leaping. Come on, leaping. And now praising, however you praise. Not yourselves or me. Definitely not that. Okay, you may now go back to And then someone who actually had some life of joy in him did the most incredible thing ever. And you may have heard this story a million times. I certainly have. And I missed all of it, all this part, until just recently. Then, where did the person who was walking, leaping, and praising go? To where? The temple. That person went to church. The one place in Jerusalem where there was no walking, leaping, and praising. Because all that was in that church was a bunch of people going, Can you understand why Satan does not fear grump at all? As long as the Christian church just sits around in whatever building you have pews or nice comfy seats or small groups in a home and just sits and goes, no, Satan's got it. You don't have to do anything more. If doubt doesn't work, rob the Christians of their joy because no one wants to join grump. It's like, well, why people don't come to church? Do you know what they actually think about church? Go out right there on Prairie New Road and do not assault people, but ask them nicely, what do you think about church? Vineyard pastor in Denver, Colorado did exactly that for a week and filmed it. We do not have a great reputation, people. I mean, if you ask people, the first thing that comes, they'll either say hypocrites, dull, boring, naff. I mean, and that's just like the first four. Some people went on, they had to beep the stuff out. Yeah, they just spent a week asking people. That's what people think. Says, well, I can't understand why my neighbors don't come to church. Why would they come to that? I don't want to go to that. And this guy snuck in. And this would happen. And then he took his leaping, and all the people saw him walking and heard him, oh my gosh, They heard him doing something. What is that word right there? Okay. Ready? Louder. Praising. Come on. Praising. Oh, my word. I still don't think the people on the recording heard that. And when they realized he was the lame beggar they'd seen so often at the beautiful gate, they were absolutely astounded. As I shared last week, I forever thought they were astounded because he was walking. Actually, yes, they were a little bit astounded because he was walking. They were a whole lot astounded there was someone at church happy to be there. Yeah. They were happy to be there. Satan's got a problem. The disciples have now got over their doubt, and they're going and they're doing stuff on the street outside the church for God's kingdom. And they're spreading something that is absolutely horribly contagious. It's like Delta, Omicron of God's kingdom. It's joy. If Satan kills if doubt doesn't kill the church, get rid of their joy. And that'll kill it. Because no one wants grump. And then what happened? And while Peter and John were speaking to the people, they were confronted by the pastors. Because what was this in our church? There was joy. As I shared last week, one of the very first Vineyard churches met in a high school with very uncomfortable seats, not unlike the seats you're sitting on right now, that are very uncomfortable. And there was young people between the ages of 14, this is a child protection nightmare, and 21 running into church. That's a problem. Why? Because they knew, they had heard from friends that if they go to that church, they will experience the manifest presence of God. And if you want to get kids excited, say God's in that place. And they're young enough to actually go and check it out as opposed to just sit there and go, They still have a little bit of energy left. And they would run into church. This is why those pastors were so worried. Because there was someone at church for the first time in hundreds of years in the temple that was actually full of joy. So, Satan's lost out on the doubt thing. Satan's lost out on the joy thing. He's got big problems. Now what does he do? He hits the church with persecution from other churches. You know, that doesn't happen today. You really should read a little bit about the one line of John Wimber's biography that I'll never forget is, I expected persecution from Satan. What I never expected was the manifest persecution from almost the entire church. If there's dancing during worship today, if a conga line forms, if kids start running into church, if there is more than just, I guarantee you I will start getting emails of a negative nature from lots of different churches. What kind of theology are you teaching? Shouldn't you know that you need to be respectful in church? Shouldn't you know that dancing should never be allowed? Shouldn't you know that people are doing that just to attract attention from themselves? And you know what? They could be right. They also are deeply threatened. Just like these pastors were. What is the third most popular thing in history that Satan does to quash down any move of God that threatens Satan's kingdom on earth? He gets the other churches involved. And the leaders were very disturbed. Don't you like that? Disturbed. That Peter and John were teaching the people, oh my word, that through Jesus there is a resurrection of the dead. And they're also really, really, really disturbed that the person outside Gate Beautiful, who they said, the lame beggar, who would not be able to walk because he had either sinned or his parents had sinned. That was their theology. They were really disturbed that their theology just got caned. Why? Because if that is the reason that person couldn't walk, that meant that Peter and John just forgave that guy's sins and all his parents. In the United States, when I grew up, the allowing what we would call the charismatic gifts of the Spirit and having a guitar in church was radical stuff that would get you absolutely caned by all your other churchy friends. And my parents grew up with that. I learned very fast at the age of 5 not to tell my friends which church I went to because of the disparaging looks and comments I was going to get. That you raise your hands in church? You have a violin? Well, you mean you don't have an organ? Well, we did too. You sing songs that aren't in a hymnal? And you think, what are you talking about, Ross? You just go back to my childhood. You go back, well, maybe more years, 40 years now. That all stuff was radical. We take it for granted, but it wasn't that way. What happens next? They arrested them, and since it was already evening, put them in jail until morning. Uh-oh. That's number 3, is to get the other churches involved. Number 4 is to use political power against the church. And interestingly, with no prior commitment or arrangement, we spent time in the entryway praying this afternoon about the persecuted church. If Satan is feeling threatened, first, the doubt. Doubt doesn't work. Second, rob the church and Jesus' followers of their joy. If that doesn't work. Third, get the other churches to yell, scream, and accuse them of all sorts of naughty things. And if that doesn't work, use the power of politics to persecute the church. And what was the result? Could everyone just start reading? Oh, one back. Right there, where that sow the number. Okay, I want you all to read that. Because sow the number. Come on, 1, 2, 3, loud. Now, 5,000! 5,000 people in 3.5 weeks. Can you imagine the jealousy at the churches together meeting if that happened? Oh, well, what's your secret, Ross? What series are you going? What book are you reading? The Bible. What's that? So that would be the conversation that we would have. Or you would suddenly not hear from anyone because they'd be so jealous. And the wonderful thing is, these aren't people that are already in God's kingdom. These are brand new. It's just not like playing round we go to the church that we like the most. These were brand new, 5,000 people in Jesus' kingdom in 3.5 weeks because his church got rid of 3 things. 1, doubt. 2, joy. 3, and 4, they weren't worried about the political cost of going to jail. Doubt, joy, flack from pastors, jail. God's got to use this church, and I'm talking you, I, CVM. Well, the first 4 things you should all expect and watch for. I guarantee you're coming. Some of them may already have come. First, doubt. You want to know the doubt that CVM would survive by changing its location, its time of day, and the day of week? You want to know the doubt? I'll tell you the doubt. I was the chief doubter amongst them all. The only reason we're here today is we had a bunch of trustees that said, I can't say what they said maybe, but they said, just steady on, Ross. Stop doubting. Joy. I shared 3 weeks ago, Julie had spent the night in hospital, came here to do worship, and found a bunch of people during worship that sat here doing nothing but going, ugh. And she came downstairs after that. I said, how'd worship go? She says, why do I even bother? Why do I bother? If they're just going to sit there, just send them home and they can watch YouTube videos of worship. It'll be like far better than me. And I went, whoa, wait a minute. I know what's going on here. And she had basically predicted by 1 week what we were going to share. It robbed us of our joy. Third, the pastors, your neighbors, your family members, they'll throw darts at you. They'll throw flack. You'll be persecuted by them. The fact I found out the neighbors were upset at us and not every other group that meets here because of parking, ironic that. There are 8 groups that meet here during the week, and the neighbors are only upset about one of them. That's us. Well, people from Vineyard take all our parking spaces. Well, yeah, but whose road is it? Anyway, don't get me started. The American has a difficult time with that conversation, particularly when we live right out by a school and there's people parking outside our house all the time. But don't you see the people getting upset? Churches together wouldn't let us in. Well, they did let us in, but they didn't want to let us in initially. They turned down our application, even though it's a Vineyard guy who does it out of South Manchester. The irony of it all. And the next thing's jail time. I would really appreciate if it's not me, because if I go to jail, I get kicked out of the country. But I probably do need to get the red passport. Or is it blue now? I forget. Sort it out, because that is a bit of a challenge. But don't you see those 4 things? Those 4 things are alive and well today. As we prayed for today, there has never more Christians have died for their faith in the last half decade than in the century before. It is incredible the number of Christians who are being killed for their faith. And this is the other incredible thing, and this is what I fear the most. God will hold us responsible for how we steward the freedom we have. What if we don't meet with that persecution? There's no risk of people coming right now through that door and arresting us. There might be other things they might do. They tried to burn the building down when they broke into it about 3.5 years ago. But not arrest. I can go on YouTube and post this and not worry about the federales knocking on my door. But that's not the case everywhere in the world. And I got to wonder, God said, I gave you all that freedom for 200, 300 years. What did you do with it? Did you go out and bring 5,000 people to Jesus, or did you just sit and go, yeah, what'd you do? Did you get scared off when someone said naughty things and made fun of your church and said, why do you drive all that way? Or all the other things I've already heard, especially amongst my work colleagues, like, why did you go to Manchester? But I went to Manchester because of that. The 5,000 people that will spend life with Jesus and not have to spend it in hell. What could be better? And I told Julie, I said, if one person through CVM comes to Jesus, that's good. That's enough for me. I'll give 20 years for that. If one person gets baptized, that's good enough. 5,000 would be great too. And within a 5,000, I might get invited to speak at NLG. But in one, no. And is it just the New Testament? No, that's stuff been going on forever. Elijah was afraid and fled for his life. This is about 800 BC. He went to Beersheba, a town near Judah and modern-day Israel. He left his servant there, and then he went along into the wilderness, the Sinai Peninsula, traveling all day, and he sat down under a solitary broom tree and prayed that he might die. Yeah. Got a joy problem, clearly? I've had enough, Lord. I have no sleep, and they won't even get up during worship. Have you heard this before? It's been going on a long time. Take my life, for I'm no better than my ancestors who have already died. Mental health crisis. It's nothing new. If you think churches don't have mental health problems, you really should read the Old Testament. There's mental health problems everywhere. And God can still work through them. Just like he can work through doubt, he can work through lack of joy, he can work through political persecution, he can work through persecution for other people in the church. He's bigger than all that. But is our focus on what's in front of us or what's above us? This is what Jesus said. Always good to end with Jesus. and then back to pizza. If the world hates you, remember that. Okay, you all got to read this part. If the world hates you, remember that. What do we remember? Hated me first. If you think being a Christian is not popular at work, guess what? Jesus is with you. If you think Jesus is not popular in your marriage, in your family, in your town, in your profession, whatever it may be, guess what? Jesus warned you. It hated me first. The world would love you as one of its own if you belonged to it, but you are no longer part of the world. That is a big problem for those who want to engage with identity politics. They should read that. Ooh, we're no longer part of the world. But we love the world, and we love the world enough to share Jesus with it. If someone who's CRB checked would just go downstairs and let Julie know, that would be great. I will then come down. If you're part of the band, would love if you could just come up and situate yourself, make sure your music's on the first song and all that good stuff. I'll let you up. I'll move to the side. Actually, I think I'll move forward because otherwise I cause camera issues. I'm slowly learning. But I'm just going to pray right now. Those big four, they're alive and well. Some of you may have never experienced. Some of you may go, yep, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one, I know that one. So Lord, I just thank you for using CVM to bring your kingdom to all the people that we encounter all week long. And Lord, if we're full of doubt right now, then Lord, I pray, like Thomas, you come to us right now in your power and overcome that doubt, that we may be used by you. If we have no joy, if we are like Elijah, I just wish this would end so I can go home. Then fill us not with some self-generated joy because I have to be happy at church. No, you fill us with your joy that we will carry out of here and spread like wildfire wherever we go and whatever conversations we have during this week. Lord, if we are made fun of by other churches, by other Christians, by other family members, whomever it may be, Lord, I pray that we remember the words of Jesus, that if the world hates you, it hated me first. And we take the exact same line that Jesus, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. But Lord, let that not stop us. And Lord, if we're thrown into jail, we're persecuted politically, and if that comes to our country as it already is in so many parts of the earth already, oh Lord, may it not stop us. The fact that the first 3 have already occurred in the last 12 months within this community and with me personally tells me that you have incredible things for us here today and those in the wider CVM community. Lord, may we steward those incredible things well. And may we bring those thousands to you. Amen.